professor at Wabash College, and this is September 19th, 2001, and this is part of the Vietnam Oral History Project that's being sponsored by the Montgomery County Historical Society. And we have our first two veterans of the series with us tonight, and I'd like to ask our two guests to introduce themselves. Gary?
I'm Gary Bell from Crawfordsville, Indiana.
I'm Joe Barton from Crawfordsville, Indiana.
Okay. I thought we'd begin asking you to tell us a little bit about your background. First of all, what you're doing now, what your jobs are, and a little bit about your family. Gary?
Right now I'm working for Nucor Steel. I've been there for 10 years this November. Right now I'm married. My wife Vicki, it'll be 30 years in October the 23rd. We have a daughter Rhonda and have a new grandson, Preston.
Okay. And prior to working at Nucor, you were a policeman in Crawfordsville?
Yes, I retired in 1990 after 20 years with the Crawfordsville Police Department.
Was that your first job after coming back from Vietnam? Or?
Yes, it was, after I got out of the service. I still had some time left in service after Vietnam, and then finished that, and then I come right back here to work.
Okay. Joe?
I work for Indiana Gas Company. I've been there over 30 years. I've been married for 33 years. I've got two kids. They're both up and growing and on their own.
How old are they?
One's 27 and one's 25.
What are they doing?
Well, one lives in Indianapolis and she went to Purdue, graduated from Purdue, and the other works for Heidemann Steel here in town.
Okay. What is your daughter do?
My daughter works for FDIC. She's a bank examiner.
Oh, okay.
She's graduate at Purdue University and master's degree at Indiana Wesleyan Business.
Okay. Joe, what's your job at Indiana? Yes.
I'm a field supervisor.
Which means what?
Oh, I take care of Crawfordsville and Rockville if anybody has any trouble.
So you keep everyone from blowing themselves up?
Well, I hope so.
Okay.
I started out reading meters and worked my way up to foreman and backhoe operator and supervisor.
Okay. At Nucor, what do you do?
I work in a warehouse. Issue out parts, work shifts.
Okay. Okay. What I'd like to do now is to get each one of you to talk a little bit about growing up, where you grew up, any important events, incidents that you recall from your childhood, high school. So, Gary?
I grew up in Putnam County at Bainbridge, Roachdale area. Was born and raised in that area. Then moved up here in the middle of my junior year and finished high school through New Ross High School. Probably the most memorable thing that happened during school was the assassination of John Kennedy. I think everybody I've talked to from there knows where they were, what they were doing at that time, and such as is what's going on today.
Sure. Some of the people you graduated with from New Ross, who are some of the people you graduated with?
Kathy Holland works at Nucor now.
Okay.
Ron Hafner, Mike Ruth. It's hard to remember.
Okay.
Wasn't that many.
Yeah. Participate in sports at Nucor?
I played basketball up through my junior year, then I was manager my senior year in basketball.
How big a high school was New Ross High School?
There was 25 in my graduating class. It was pretty impressive to talk to other kids that when I went in the service, talking about they was in classes of 300, 600, 1,000, then I told them 25, and they couldn't believe it was one that small.
What was the value of growing up in a small town?
I think education-wise, we had a better opportunity because there was less students for the teacher to teach to, and I think we had excellent teachers at that time.
Sure.
And I think they had more time to spend with each individual student. I think that was the most important thing in a small school.
Yeah. How big is New Ross, or was New Ross at the time?
I don't know how many people lived in New Ross, but there's probably 100, 125 in the school,
sure.
In the high school.
Yeah. Yeah. Joe, what about your growing up experience?
I was born in Lebanon, Indiana, which is in Boone County, and we moved to Waynetown in 1955, and I've lived there ever since until I got married and moved to Crawfordsville.
What high school did you graduate?
Waynetown High School.
Waynetown. You didn't graduate with the Harples, did you?
They was a couple years ahead of me.
Jim and Chuck?
They graduated with my brother Harvey.
Oh, okay. Okay. What do you recall about living in Waynetown?
You couldn't get by with anybody because there was only 500 people in Waynetown, and every time you did something, everybody knew about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like today. Guys, kids do things and nobody ever knows about it. You know?
Yeah.
And everybody knows your parents, so if you get in trouble at school, it usually that beats you home.
Yeah. What do you remember about high school? Any particular events stand
I
out?
played basketball all the way through high school.
Okay.
If I wasn't for basketball, I might not have graduated. You know?
And this was at a time when Montgomery County had the county tournament, and they'd all play the sectional here in Crawfordsville. At the old gym.
Everybody wanted to be Crawfordsville. Like Gary said, our class was 17, so we had a real small class.
We beat them in basketball.
New Rise beat at Waynetown in basketball.
In our kindergarten through 12th grade, we probably had 175 kids.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a small school.
Sure. Do you keep in contact with the people? Do you go back to high school reunions?
Might have once in a while.
Yeah.
I went on my 25th, and then there's only 2 of us showed up out of 17.
Really? Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'm not going to waste my time.
Gary, does New Ross still have reunions?
Occasionally, on like the 5-year reunions, that's mostly when most people get together.
Yeah. Looking at your graduating classes, were there any other people you graduated with who ended up in Vietnam?
There was a boy behind me in class got killed in Vietnam.
Okay.
From the county here.
How far behind you was he?
Just 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah, I knew him.
What was his name?
Stallhut,
Okay.
Leonard Stallhut.
How about you, Gary? Anyone in the New Ross graduating class that ended up in Vietnam?
Monty Harris, the local attorney, he was in Vietnam. I'm not positive if anybody else was
Okay.
actually in Vietnam.
Okay.
I know some were in that area
Yeah.
or stationed in that theater.
Sure, sure. Growing up, Joe, father in the military, World War II?
My
Or?
dad served in World War II as in the Navy. And my brother also served in the Navy. And he's a police officer here in Crawfordsville now.
Okay.
So,
Is your nephew Todd Burton?
yes,
Okay, I had Todd in class.
yes.
Interesting story, a young man who's been an EMT, right?
Right.
And what's he doing now?
He's an EMT again. I mean,
See,
he's back on the fire department.
That's right, because he had a medical
Yeah.
problem, and so he's back. Okay, so I make that connection. What did your father do in World War II?
I don't know. He was on a ship.
He didn't really talk about it, didn't have a lot of
I know when I was
stories?
born, he was in Calcutta, India.
Ah,
And I was 3 months old before he found out I was born.
yeah.
And I'm a baby of 5.
Yeah.
So
What did your father do when he came back from the service?
he had a poultry house there in Waynetown, and
Okay.
we had our own business for a while. And then
Sure.
we got out of that, and he worked at different places until he retired.
Yeah.
He had to retire kind of medical reasons.
Okay. Gary, growing up, any relatives in the family who had?
Yeah, my father was opposite of Joe. Joe joined the Army, and his father was in the Navy. I'm the opposite. My father was in the Army, and I joined the Navy.
Stationed in Europe, or where was he
My
stationed?
father was stationed in Panama.
Oh, he was?
And he was a driver for a colonel. You know,
Okay.
had a pretty good job.
What years are we talking about?
You're talking in the early 40s.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
Then I had an uncle that was in the Navy in the USS Hancock,
Okay.
and 2 other uncles in the European theater.
Mhm. When you were growing up in Waynetown and New Ross, they didn't have movie theaters.
Yes, they did.
Did they? Did Waynetown have a
They
movie?
had movie theaters every Saturday night in the summertime against a big old brick wall.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see any war movies when you were
No.
growing up?
Not on the TV, not
Yeah.
city that put them on,
Yeah.
but I think when we first got our TV, you could see war
Sure.
movies then, but that was
Yeah.
a long time ago.
Yeah. Gary, any war movies? Going to a theater?
Yes, my father watched a lot of war movies, and
Yeah.
I watched a lot of them with him. He was a John Wayne fan and watched a lot of them.
Any particular John Wayne movie that you remember that sticks out, or?
Oh, the Sansa was.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And
Right.
that was probably one of my favorites of the war.
Sure.
But I think it makes you believe that war is easy,
Absolutely
Yeah.
does.
and it's not.
That's what you found out when.
Yes. you know, you watch some of the movies today, and they can outrun machine guns and everything. It just doesn't happen that way. You know.
But I still think it instilled some of the patriotic values in watching these movies. The way they were made then.
Sure.
Now.
So in some ways you're saying there were some positive features to those war movies.
Yes.
The patriotism and fighting for one's country.
Oh, yes.
But they don't give you the sense of what wars are.
Right.
Let's move on. After you graduated from high school, did you go on to college? Did you work, or did you go right into the military? Gary?
I started work with Alton Box Board in Lafayette, where my father worked.
Okay.
Working with him, and then the draft was really strong at that time. There was no question in my mind that I was going to the military.
What year are we talking about here?
We're talking 1966.
Okay.
And that summer I worked. I went in. I ended up joining the Navy. Went in on a buddy plan on a 120-day delayed entry program, and it lasted, I think, 32 days before I got called up.
Oh, okay.
But I went ahead and joined the Navy because of the Army draft, you know, and I thought, well, if I can, I would go in on a choice and try to get the schooling that I wanted.
So why did you pick the Navy?
A friend of mine that we went in the buddy plan, his brother was in the Navy. Tom Schillings is who I'm talking about. His brother was in the Navy, and he talked a lot about the Navy. And at that particular time, while we were talking about it, a Navy recruiter came to the high school and talked to us, and I was impressed with him and what he had to say. And all of the schooling programs that they offered at that time, I thought that was a good plan, so that started it.
So the schooling you were after, what was it that you wanted to do in the Navy?
Well, I wanted to go to radio communication school. My brother worked for a phone company, and I thought at that time that'd be a good job to come out of the service. And I was guaranteed.
The recruiter guaranteed?
Yes, sir. I was guaranteed the school, and then in the boot camp, I got my orders, and I told the Navy chief, I said, I've got the wrong orders, and he told me, he said, you're just reading them wrong, you know. So, anyway, what happened, he told me to put down second and third choices.
Right.
And hospital corpsman was hospital corps school was one of the schools that I'd put down.
And they obviously needed corpsmen more than radio.
I didn't, in the height of the Vietnam War, they needed medics right now.
Where was your basic training at?
Great Lakes.
It was at Great Lakes. Describe a little bit about basic training at Great Lakes. What do you remember from your basic
The
training?
very first flight I ever took on an airplane was going to boot camp. You know, it was in the middle of the night in a small aircraft.
So you flew from where to
We
where?
flew from Indianapolis to Chicago, then bussed out to
So
Great Lakes.
you landed at O'Hare or
Yes.
Midway?
O'Hare. I believe it was.
Yeah.
I was too nervous. I
Yeah.
had to really pay attention.
What was the first week like?
Well, the first week of going in the gates, I saw these two sailors standing there, and they only had the leggings on. And really, I was impressed with the looks of the uniform, and these guys, find out they were boots too, you know, just like I was. But the first 2 weeks was going through medical tests and find out
Sure.
where you go before you were actually assigned to a company. And that's, I went in with Tom Schillings on the buddy plan. Immediately we were separated because I had a weakness in my right eye, and they held me back until they got that all checked and sent him on. So that was the last time I saw him on the buddy plan.
Yeah. How long was basic training at Great Lakes?
Basic training was 9 weeks.
Okay, so you did your 9 weeks. What time of the year was this when you were going through?
This was in like August of '66.
Okay. Did you get a leave then after basic training?
Right after the day we graduated, that afternoon we got our passes and got a 30-day leave to come home.
So what were you feeling when you came home at that point? Been through basic?
I made it. I survived boot camp, and it wasn't as bad as I really thought it was going to be. It was tough. There was no doubt about it, that preparing it.
Physically tough? Mentally tough?
Physically, mentally. We were mentally challenged. We were given a lot of school classes and basic schools to exercise your mind as well as your body.
This is a question I've always wanted to ask Navy guys. Do you have to know how to swim to be in the Navy?
Yes, you do. They teach you.
They did teach
They
you?
teach you. Several people did not know how to swim. I was not a good swimmer, but I learned real quick. They went into a swimming pool area and took you off of about a 15-foot tower and jumped in the water, and then they had a long pole for you to grab hold of in case, but they pretty much made you learn to swim, and they told you all about what to do when you got in, and it wasn't so bad
After the basic training, then you went to corpsman school, right? Where was that?
It was at Great Lakes also.
It was. How long was that?
It was 14 weeks.
What was the concept behind the medical education for a corpsman? I mean, what were they trying to do to prepare you?
The basics was in emergency, first aid, and basic care, aftercare, after first aid, and then on through hospital training, and further into towards the latter part of it, we were learning more like how to do sutures, start IVs, and life-saving techniques.
Right. After corpsman school, another leave, probably, right? Did you have another leave?
No, I went on to my next duty station. It may have been like 3 or 4 days,
Okay.
and then
And the next duty station was where?
Naval Hospital, Key West, Florida.
Nice duty.
I did get my first choice in that, you know.
And what did you do there?
It was I worked in the emergency room, and then later worked in the surgical ward.
Now, Key West, Florida, I mean, there aren't any major bases down there, right?
No, before they built the 7-mile bridge connecting the islands,
Right.
it used to be overseas paid to be stationed in Key West, Florida.
Oh, really?
But they do have 2 major bases in Key West.
Oh, okay.
I don't know exactly what's open now.
Right.
But they had the Naval Air Station in Key West, Florida, and the Naval Base, which housed the sonar school and submarine service.
So, your duty was pretty routine. Treatment wasn't too
Pretty
out
much
of the ordinary.
Continuous schooling, you know, and training, and through working in the emergency room, I've got a lot of experience, which really prepared me for
Sure.
later combat.
What kind of things were you dealing with in the
Oh,
emergency room?
Automobile wrecks,
Oh, okay.
standard emergency room thing, you know, lacerations,
Sure.
heart attacks,
Right.
you name it.
So your job was sort of to stabilize these people, and then if they were serious, they'd be flown out
Yes,
to.
we had a doctor on duty all the
Yeah.
time that was there with us, you know, but for the most part, we were their first
Right.
primary care
Right.
givers.
Okay. Joe, let's talk a little bit about you. After you graduated, right into the military, or did you work for a while?
No, I worked for Indiana State Highway.
Okay.
I worked for them for a couple of years and I got drafted.
Okay, so you did get drafted.
Yes, I got.
Do you remember when you got your draft notice?
Oh, yes.
When
This
was
is
it?
greeting and salutation. The day I left, my brother came home from the Navy after 4 years.
Really?
He came home in the afternoon and I left that morning.
Okay. So you got your draft notice. What year are we talking about?
65.
65, so Vietnam was underway at that point. You got drafted. Where did you go for basic training?
We went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and you was asking Gary about going in there. We went in the middle of the night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, and they took us to a barricade, or to our barracks where we were supposed to stay. Well, they put us in the wrong one. It was supposed to be for airborne. We definitely didn't want to be airborne. So, you know, probably about 6 o'clock we finally got settled in, and of course we had to go out all day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but basic, I don't know.
How long was basic training?
It was 6 weeks.
Okay, 6
But-
weeks.
But when you're 20 years old, you know, you're used to things. You can take a lot more.
Was there a mix in your group of pretty young guys, you know, 17-year-olds?
I was 20 years old when I went through basic, and most of them was 18.
Yeah. So,
When I was in Vietnam, I turned 22, and most of them was 18 and 19.
so what did you notice the difference between the 18-year-olds and you in basic?
Not a whole lot. Some of them was cockier.
Yeah. Okay.
But on the whole, the instructors didn't let them get by with much, so they calmed down after the first week.
Did you have an interesting drill instructor in basic training? Do you remember your?
They're all interesting. They was all back from Vietnam.
They were.
Yes.
So were they telling you stories?
Yeah, they told us stories to scare us, not to help us.
Right.
Same way when after I got out of basic, I come home and spent a week, and then I went to Fort Eustis, Virginia, for a single engine, single rotary helicopter repairman. And all our instructors there was back from Vietnam. And all they wanted to tell you was horror stories. They didn't tell you about the good things that happened.
Why do you think they were doing that?
Get you prepared. I don't think anybody can prepare you for going to Vietnam.
Right. But they felt that by telling you the worst aspects,
Right.
at least you'd walk in with some sense of what was
Yeah, we
going
went over by ship.
on. You did?
Yeah, we spent 30 days on a ship going to Vietnam.
Where did you leave from?
California. See, after I got out of Fort Eustis, we went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and we left as a company. We packed up the whole company.
And that's unusual.
Yeah. And when we got to Quang Nhân, we unloaded everything. There was nothing when we got there.
So all the helicopters went to...
They went on a separate ship, but
Yeah.
we went on a troop carrier.
Yeah.
And that's an experience. I don't care if they can have Navy.
Now, Gary, when you went over, did you go with a group of people, or did you go
All
individually?
hospital corpsmen, except for the stewards.
Yeah.
When we left, first we went from, I went from Key West to San Diego to Camp Pendleton to the FMF, which is Fleet Marine Corps Combat Training, and it was combat medical. It was a extra 5-week course on combat medicine and staying out in the mountains and survival and a little bit of everything and preparing school. When we left, we flew, bussed up to San Bernardino, Norton Air Force Base, and we had a civilian aircraft, standard airline. I've never even heard of it before. But we flew out of there and went to Anchorage, Alaska. Of course, in the middle of summer, it's beautiful.
Sure.
The
Right.
mountains are gorgeous.
Right.
Then when we left there, we were going to Okinawa, and we had to divert to Japan because one of the stewards had a appendicitis attack, and we would like stay in the airport there for like 2 hours, and then flew on to Okinawa. And about 3 days there, I think, then on to Vietnam.
Your experience, Gary's talking about, Joe's talking about the fact that he had people coming who were teaching him who were Vietnam veterans. How about at the extra combat medical training you had? Were these
At FMF,
Yeah.
just about everybody there was from Vietnam.
Yeah.
Very good, probably some of the best instruction I got there, and really prepared us. Like Joe said, you can't really be prepared
Right.
totally for combat, but they've done the best they could with, at the time to get us prepared to go.
Were they trying to scare you?
We had, I can't say really that. We had a Marine sergeant that was assigned to us that walked us through and talked to us about, and he really treated the corpsmen pretty good, but he was really tough on us too, and I understand now, looking back at it, why that was, but I think it was not so much a scare as it was to just open your mind and prepare you for what you're going to, as close as they can.
When you enlisted, when you were working in Key West, Florida, did you expect to go to Vietnam at some point?
I knew the potential was always there. Being a medic, being at the height of the Vietnam War was in its height,
Yeah.
I knew pretty well that either I would do that or go shipboard. I never did go aboard a ship.
Yeah.
The whole time.
What kind of choices or what kind of assignments did people get who were corpsmen? I mean, you mentioned shipboard assignments.
Well, you could go shipboard, you go to hospitals,
Okay.
work in hospitals. You could actually go on for further training, go into x-ray tech or
Oh, okay.
dental techs,
Right.
operating room techs.
Okay.
There's all avenues available there for extra training.
Now, when you found out you were going to Vietnam as a corpsman, would there have been possibilities for you to end up, say, in a hospital in Saigon?
Could have very well.
Yeah.
When I went through the FM training, they found my the weak eye again.
Right.
I went through there, and my chart was stamped unfit for combat duty. And then they sent me to Vietnam. And 2/3 of the way through that, a little over 2/3 of the way through that, they opened my files again and found out that I wasn't ready for, or that shouldn't have been in combat, and they pulled me out of a combat unit and put me with a med battalion in an intensive care unit.
Okay.
That
was
wasn't
in
until then, well, yeah, that was in Vietnam.
Okay.
But my initial assignment was with a combat unit.
Okay. How did you end up with helicopters after being drafted?
You take tests,
Okay.
and that's what they needed. It didn't make any difference, I don't think, what you scored on the test, it's what they needed at the time.
So after you went through.
Because we had people, college graduates, was infantry.
Yeah.
So, you know, it made no sense how they did it.
So when you got after basic training, I remember with mine, our last day of basic training, they came in with the list where everybody
Right.
was going,
Right.
and they read off your next assignment. So when you heard you were going to helicopter school, were you pretty excited about that, or what?
I thought, what in the world am I going to do in helicopters? But they took us through a really extensive training.
Yeah.
I can remember my first helicopter flight, it like that scared me to death. I mean, we went up and they pulled an auto rotation. I don't know if you know what an auto rotation, that's when they just shut her down and just glide in. And we slid in, and I said, I'll never get another one.
So what was your MLS?
6, 7, and 20.
Okay, and that was.
Single engine, single rotary helicopter repairman.
Okay, so you started out as a repairman.
Right.
You figured you'd probably end up in Vietnam, or did you?
Yeah, I thought I'll second guess them, I'll volunteer to go.
So
Use some psychology on it. It didn't work. I went anyway.
So you went and told someone I'm ready
Well,
to go?
you can put down your duty that you want to go to.
Yeah.
And I figured, well, with that MOS, I'm going to Vietnam anyway, so I might as well volunteer.
So after you finished your advanced individual training, did you go directly to Vietnam, or?
No, we went to Fort Benning, Georgia.
Oh, that's right, you mentioned that.
And then we packed up. I mean, we
That's
spent
right.
3 months there just packing things up. We took everything with us.
So you weren't doing a lot of training at this point,
We
it was
didn't do
just
anything.
packing?
Just packing.
Do they have a helicopter pilot school at Fort Benning?
No, it's at Fort Eustis, or
Okay.
Fort Rucker.
In Alabama?
Yeah, that's where most of the warrant officers come
Yeah.
from. I've probably seen 3 or 4 helicopters in Fort Benning. You know, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. As you're going over, what did you expect when you got to Vietnam? What did you think it was going to be like, Gary?
Of course, prior to going to Vietnam, the TV was full of combat, full of body bags being shipped home, you know, and that's what the public saw constantly. I actually, when I went over, I never thought I was coming back. And I can relate that with a lot of people who went there, you know. I mean, they had the same feeling that we just weren't sure, because it was regardless of what your politics or whether the war just wasn't going well. It wasn't able to fight a war like you normally would fight a war, and there was a lot of casualties because of it. You know.
Tell me again the day you arrived in Vietnam. What was the date?
It was in June of 68.
Okay. June.
I'm not sure the exact date I landed.
June 1968.
Yeah. As we flew in, it was in daylight, and I can see out there was not a cloud in the sky. Beautiful mountain, beautiful scene. It was a beautiful country. Probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Till you got up close and could see the scars.
Where did you land?
Da Nang. And as we were landing, I looked off into towards the mountain range, and I can see 2 F-4s making airstrikes, and then it all of a sudden say, "Hey, we're here." You know, it's not just Vietnam; it's the war of Vietnam. You know?
What was the atmosphere like on the plane? I mean, were people quiet, joking,
Nervous, quiet. You had occasional laughter come out, but it wasn't really that much, because it was subdued to certain.
Okay. Joe, what were your expectations on your way? You're on this troop ship, right?
Yes.
How many people were on the troop ship? Do you have any
I think
idea?
it was around 3,000.
So, who was on the troop ship?
All kinds of different people. I mean, they was taking other combat
Okay.
infantry and everything else over there.
And again, give us a date on this.
It was around Easter. I can't tell you the exact date. I do know that when we first got there, they put us full field pack with our rifles and set us up on top of this deuce and a half to guard all this stuff with no ammunition. And you know, we're going through town, and here we are, we're sitting up there, and I thought, you know, probably a good thing I don't have a bullet, because I'd probably shoot somebody just out of...
What year? What year was
That
this?
was in 65. Or,
Okay.
yeah, 66.
66. So you guys were both there about the same time?
Yeah.
On this, how long did it take the troop ship to get to Vietnam?
30 days.
30 days, and where did you land?
We landed at Quang Nhân. So we had a stopover in Hawaii for about 8 hours, and they let us off. And then we got into Japan, and they let us off for 8 hours. And then when we got back on, we went to Vietnam. And I remember going into, we were probably 6 or 7 days out of Vietnam, and it got this odor. I thought, what in the world is this? And it was the country of Vietnam. And I didn't realize that that country stunk until I went on R&R, flew out, and flew back in. And Gary attests to it, the country stinks. It's just got an odor of its own.
A unique odor,
Yes,
unique
it
smell.
does.
And that smell's still with you today? I mean,
And, well, you know, sometimes you can get an odor and you just,
Yeah.
it just flashes back in front of you.
yeah. So what were you talking about on this troop ship? I mean, this is right out of World War II, where they were
Oh, I
taking
know.
people.
It was terrible. A lot of times they put everything off limits. You couldn't go nowhere, and then you had to pull fire watch at night. And then if you pull fire watch at night, you couldn't sleep during the day because the Navy doesn't sleep in the day. You know, just stupid things like that.
Were people sharing their fears, their expectations?
Well, you know, most of us didn't know what to expect. We was kind of all in the same boat, so really and truly, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
you know, they're all young kids, first time away from home, they're homesick, you know, it's just different.
When you landed in Vietnam, did you go through in-country training?
Oh, no.
No.
We went out, we got on our deuce and a half, and we drove about 6 miles outside of Quang Nhân, and we set up our own tents, our own quantity wire, started pulling guard that night, not knowing a thing about what was going on. And our helicopters wasn't even there. We was there a good 2 weeks before they showed up.
Were the pilots there?
No, they came over with the helicopter.
Helicopters.
So, you know, it was kind of different.
Okay.
We just went out on a big mountain, and that was our thing. We started making everything.
Tell me a little bit where the location is in Vietnam.
It was just outside of Quang Nhân, about 6 miles, and it was just a big old mountain.
Quang Nhân is where
You know, about the middle, a little up north.
How far north of Saigon? Do you have any idea?
Oh, it's way far. It's probably another 2 or 3 hours by aircraft.
Okay. Up closer to Da Nang?
Yeah, it was north of Da Nang.
It's north. So you're getting up to Hue and...
Well, it's right before you get to Hue. We flew a lot of missions out of Hue.
Okay.
So.
Your location first in country.
Okay, we landed at Nang. That day they broke us up into different units, and like I was assigned to 1st Marine Division. And they put us on a C-130 and flew us immediately to Phu Bai. And at night...
And where's that located?
It's in the northern I Corps. It's not far away from Khe Sanh.
Okay,
You know.
sure.
Then, and that night you could see airdrops, you know, dropping canister flares all around the area. As the battle of Khe Sanh was going on at that time. And the very next morning they put us on a CH-47 double prop helicopter and flew us to Mountain 689 in Khe Sanh, which just right to the south of 881, which most people remember from the major battles in Khe Sanh.
Right.
And within 48 hours I was involved in my first combat from the time of landing.
So there was no in-country adjustment time, no
It
in-country
was
training.
right to business.
Right to business.
Went from
The
one
most,
plane to another.
yeah, the most impressive thing, I think, the very first day, my lieutenant, who was killed a little later, no, I'll explain what
Okay.
happened there later, but he asked us to come out to his bunker, and he wanted to give us a little indoctrination to the company and let us know what we were doing that night. But he wanted us to watch what was happening, and in come F-4 Phantom with a pilot and navigator at eye level with us on a mountain. I mean, they were coming through the pass and dropping napalm it was so massive, so impressive that, my gosh, you're eye level with an aircraft like that moves that fast. And that was the first action I saw in Vietnam.
So what was the responsibility of the Marine unit on this hill?
At this time, it was basically a fire support group. They had an artillery unit on that top of that mountain, and they give fire support. Plus, we do recon patrols throughout down into the valley area and back to check for movement.
Okay. Normally, with your group, how many people were going out on some of these recon patrols?
Most of it was squad.
Okay.
Which was like anywhere from 8 to 14 people, just depending on your
and every time a squad went out, they had a corpsman with them.
And my first night I didn't go out, the second night I did. And we went out on a recovery mission that night. We had 6 Marines that were killed at the bottom of the hill. And we had to go down and retrieve. At that time, it was getting close to the end of when we were pulling out of Quezon. And we had to retrieve those 6 bodies. And I think we ended up carrying 30 bodies up the hill that night because you couldn't distinguish Marine from NVA, or which is North Vietnamese Army, or as we found some Chinese in there too, like advisors. You know.
Really?
But it was hard to see, and it took most of the night to retrieve those bodies and move around without too much detection. You know.
So what were you feeling on this first mission? Scared.
Scared. I mean, there's just no way you can sit there that say your teeth weren't chattering, your knees were knocking. You know, I mean, I had no idea. I mean, I just came right from hustle and bustle of San Diego, you know, and right into combat zone was death and destruction and bodies laying around. You know, it's you know, at 19 years old, that's pretty tough indoctrination.
Right. Was there any enemy contact that first night? Or?
That night we didn't, but just about every night our lines at one time or another being probed, and it was I think the third night I was there, second night or third night, I can't remember the exact night. I took 2 KIAs that were being probed and were shot.
Sure. Joe, first experience, combat-related experience.
Well, see, now, a lot of people don't realize, even though you got a 6, 7, and 20 MOS, you do not have to be a crew chief. That is a volunteer. And the difference between a crew chief and a gunner is very simple. When you're in the air, you both got M60s. When you're on the ground, the crew chief takes care of the helicopter and the gunner takes care of the guns. But when you're in the air, you do the same thing. Right. Probably the first time.
And so which were you?
I was a crew chief.
So you were responsible for maintenance as well as the guns, firing the guns
yes.
when you're on the helicopter?
Yes. First time we went out on a gun run and we was picking up automatic weapon fire, and all at once I kept hearing it go poof, poof, right underneath us. And I thought, what in the world are they shooting at us? And what it was another ship right behind us throwing grenades right underneath us. And I mean, tell you, it's scary because they was just popping right underneath us. And once you got used to it, it was a little bit different. But when you're on a gun run, you're running 80 knots going down, and you can just feel it whenever you shoot a rocket, it's just the recoil.
Yeah, but now your training was primarily in maintenance.
Yes.
So what kind of training did you have to fire these weapons?
First time out.
First time out. That was your first.
You got some training in basic training, just shooting an M14, but nothing like a machine gun.
Right. And this was an M60.
M60 machine gun.
I mean, that's not an easy thing to fire.
You can fire pretty easy in a helicopter. When you're adrenaline going, you can hold it pretty good.
How much do those things weigh?
Well, see, we had a bungee cord that hung down,
right,
and you could shoot it up there with one hand, not a problem.
Because it was just hanging.
It takes a shot.
It wasn't rusting or
no.
anything.
If you get down on the ground and lay down and shoot it, it'll scoot you backwards. But when you're in a helicopter, probably the worst thing is you're trying to hang out the helicopter doors, and then the rockets are going off by your feet.
So these are Huey helicopters.
Yes.
2 gunners.
Right.
Pilot, co-pilot.
That's it.
That's it. And so you're learning to fire these weapons on the job.
On the job.
What's the key to being a good shot with as a
Well,
door
we had
gunner?
tracers. Every fourth round was a tracer, so you could see where your bullets was going. If you didn't have that, you couldn't tell where it was going. And when we first got there, all of our guns on our helicopter was M60s. And then we was in country about 3 or 4 months, and we got the Gatling guns. You know, that's the one that barrels rotates and stuff. And I tell you, they was awesome. It was just awesome. Best firepower you could put out.
How many rounds could you put out?
Forget it. It was like you just covered every square foot of the football field with a 3-second burst.
Okay,
So it's a lot of firepower.
what type of run you were making? Gun runs? What other type of runs did you?
All we did was go out if a slick got in trouble, which is a troop carrier, or if we was inserting troops or taking out troops. That's about the only time we would go out. They wouldn't let us just go out flying around, because about every time we was in the air, we was on a mission.
Okay.
And I've seen times when we've had 100 gunships at one time going in on a mission, and it'd be 300 or 400 slicks. And our job was to go in, pepper the LZ, which is a landing zone, and then the slicks come in and land and get the troops.
And when you say a slick, what type of a helicopter?
This is Huey too.
But how many men can a slick carry?
Well, a lot depends on the heat, because you know you can't get left if you got too much heat.
Right.
But usually they carry a platoon, 12 to 14 people, counting the door gunners and
Right.
everything.
Right.
You know, everybody sees a helicopter now, they lift up and take off. When you're loaded, you don't do that. You take off like a fixed wing. You bounce along and you get enough airspeed and you can get up.
So you guys are going in, preparing the LZ, laying down some fire,
Yep.
and then the slicks come in, and
Put the troops in or takes the troops out.
and people think that they just land softly, but in many cases, how high off the ground were they?
The slicks, sometimes they didn't even touch ground. You know, you had to jump out. They just made you jump out.
They would tell us to jump out into that grass, they just didn't tell you the grass was a
So did the Marines have their own helicopters?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, we flew combination.
Right, we flew on Army
Right.
helicopters too.
So, were they pushing you out?
Oh,
No.
yes.
You know. Well, see, there again, I was in a helicopter.
Right.
We never got down. We never
Right.
got down on the ground. But we used to get calls all the time that we was shooting our own troops. And what it was is the empty cartridges from our guns was falling out the doors, and they was falling down in the trees, and it sounded like we was shooting.
Oh, so they thought you were
You know,
still
and
shooting.
they'd say, you guys are shooting us. Well, it was just our empties.
What are some of the experiences that?
One of the dumbest things we ever did in Vietnam, I hate to even tell this, we was in Hue Phu Bai, and we was flying everything north. We flew into North Vietnam every day because we had troops in there.
There were troops in North Vietnam?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Special forces, and you know, and we would fly escort for them if they got in trouble. We was there to help. We come back one night, and they told us we had to go back, and we had to fly back to our base to get qualified on the on the rifle range. Honest to God truth, we flew for 3 hours, go back, shoot our M60 on the rifle range, get back in the helicopter, fly back up.
Wow.
That's the Army. That's all I can say.
So your time to be requalified had come up, and they wouldn't let you shoot the weapons until you had qualified.
Yep. But we was not qualified when we first went over there. But we did, we flew all the way back.
So how far into North Vietnam did you get?
One night we thought we'd seen lights of some of the major cities.
Really?
Yeah. Because we had a down pilot up there and we was trying to get to them. And when we come in that night, we landed on fumes. And Gary can attest, Christmas, New Year's, they make you take all the ammo off your helicopters and stuff. First time they did that, we went up and we picked up automatic weapon fire. We come back and loaded up, and that was the end of it. You know, we're not going to fly without protection.
Why were they asking you to take off?
It was a truce.
Oh,
They
it's
was
the
taking
Christmas truce,
Yeah.
holiday truce.
Yes. You know.
Tet truce.
Yeah. You know, they always come up with some reason, but they didn't honor it.
Were you involved with medical evacuations at all?
We'd fly escort force for them.
Okay.
And I tell you, some of the slicks went into areas that I wouldn't even want to be. I mean, they'd go right in there under fire, didn't make any difference. They go in there and get the
Did you fly all the time with the same pilot, co-pilot, and other door
Most of the
runner?
time.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Talk a little bit about those guys.
They was crazy. It was all warrant officers.
Explain the difference between a warrant officer and
A
a
warrant
regular
officer is just an officer that went to school to be a pilot. They're not a commissioned officer like a regular officer. And about all your pilots were warrant officers. There was a few captains and lieutenants, but most of them was warrant officers. But they was good pilots, very good. And today, if you see 3 or 4 helicopters going together, you can tell they've been to Vietnam or not, because they can get so close that they look like they're just right one. You know.
Well, the pilot that you worked with on his first tour, second tour?
He was on his second tour and he was crazy. We would fly so low sometimes that between the rice paddies, they had little dikes. We'd have to get up and go over them dikes because we'd be so low.
Why was he flying so low?
Because they can't shoot you. You're going so fast, the time they hear you, you're already gone. If you get up 1,000 feet, they hear you, they got time to shoot at you. So you either flew high or right on the deck. And he did it just to scare people.
Yeah.
You know?
Any real close calls that you had?
No, the day I quit flying, I had 11 days to come home when I quit flying. We went into an LZ and we come out, we had over 100 bullets holes in my ship. I come back and we landed in Quignon and they told us we was going to have to fly it back to our base, and I said, I'm not flying again. I said, it's a volunteer. I pressed my luck, I'm not flying again. And the only way I got in one, I got in a slick and flew back to my base. I wouldn't fly back in. I red exit, which mean it's unsafe to fly, and they wanted us to fly it anyway. I said, no, I won't. So that was the end of my flying days.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your experiences, some things that really stand out.
Some of the more memorable, I take great pride in, was going into the villages and setting up medical aid stations and helping the people and working with them. I found the Vietnamese people to be genuine, you know, for the most part, very nice people. Most of them that I dealt with more or less want to be left alone. They want to be left alone to raise their families and their children and their rice paddies and do their work, but they were very appreciative of what we done, and we treated for all kinds of illnesses, give birth to babies, whatever, but I enjoyed doing that as much as anything. It was dangerous at times, and many times we did have shootouts in the villages, you know, because of that, and it was a Viet Cong, their way of trying to scare the locals to stay away from the Americans.
As a corpsman, did you carry a weapon?
Yes, I carried a 45, standard issue 45 when I went in, but by the time I left Quezon, I was carrying an M16.
I mean, we hear stories about some corpsmen being conscientious objectors, not carrying
I
weapons.
think some people volunteered for that service because they could do that,
Right,
you know, because they didn't want to weapon.
Right.
And you didn't have to carry a weapon if you didn't want to.
Did you run into some other corpsmen who didn't carry weapons?
Not myself. I've heard of incidents where it was, but for the most part, I never saw any of all the corpsmen that I went to, the training with and everything. Everybody carried weapons and ended up carrying M16s. A lot of times, you're involved in combat, you couldn't get to the position where the wounded was or whatever, and you were involved in the combat yourself, and it was a situation where you had to.
Yeah.
So you wanted to have some sort of protection, you know.
You mentioned earlier that your lieutenant died, or
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
This was in just north of Cantian in the DMZ, demilitarized them. I had a recon unit, was ambushed, I think it was August the 24th, 1968, when we first went in. Our unit was called in to bail out these guys. They had a couple, 3 KIAs and were pinned down. Well, we got in and got them out on the choppers that we went in on. And we set up that night and exchanged mortar fire with the position they were getting ambushed from. Well, that quieted down the next morning, and we started moving over like a 45-degree slope ridge, and then the ambush really started, the big ambush started, and it was NVA regulars. And I hear all kinds of numbers today. I don't know how many there are, but I do know that there was a lot of casualties taken that day. I know immediately I was called up a position to tend to a Marine that was shot in the leg. And I was patching him up, and I could hear mortar rounds moving in closer. And when I got hit, I really didn't hear the mortar round go off. At least I don't think it. I don't remember.
Yeah.
And the only thing I remember is the burning sensation, and I got shrapnel. And another corpsman come over and helped me finish up with that guy, and then he patched me up, and we drug him over the slope. And that's when I got back there, I found out my lieutenant had called me over to the position where the guy was shot, that he was killed as they were attacking a tree line. And we ended up, I think, immediately we had 4 KIs that day. And then the total numbers I can't remember today. There's question about, I've been going to reunions, and we've been talking to other corpsmen that were in the same unit, and the numbers range anywhere from 6 to 16. But I think that the 16 is the total from all the units involved in that
Sure.
operation,
Sure.
because we ended up with ARVN, which is South Vietnamese Army, coming in to help, and an Army tank unit, which was kind of a memorable thing, because now the Ed Stewart, who you'll be interviewing on a later day, he was one of the tank commanders in the tanks that come in that bailed us out. And we're both from Crowdsville, Indiana. And at that time, we didn't know each other. I knew his father,
Right.
but we didn't know it until we started comparing notes later that was the unit, and his was the unit that come in and got us out.
Were your wounds serious enough that you had to be medevaced out, or?
Well, I was taken out on a stretcher. I was put on, at that time, the most serious wounded and the KIAs were taken out on helicopter. We lost 2 choppers that day, 2 slicks. They come in and they were shot down.
Right.
And we was able to strip those out and get the people out and get all the medevacs out. Mine, I could move around, but I just couldn't walk. I had a piece of shrapnel on my right hip, and it was just scraping on the bone, you know, where I could, every time I moved it, just cut into it.
Right.
But I could still tend to the wounded, you know, where they
Right.
bring them back to us. So we got all those out, and the lesser wounded were taken out on personnel carriers and tanks.
Mm-hmm.
They put me on a stretcher on the back of a tank, and of course, you know, a tank, the treads started throwing dirt up on me, and I was just covered with dirt. But it was the sweetest ride I ever had in my life, you know. At that day, prior to that, I thought, well, I made it through Quezon and a couple other battles, and I thought, well, yeah, maybe things will get.
How long into the tour was this? How many
Well, this was again, I was in Quezon in June, July of '68, and that was in August of '68, like the 24th and 25th.
Right.
I was starting to feel better, at least more accustomed to what was going on, what I was doing, and never really felt safe, but felt like I was having a little bit more in control of what was going on than when I first got there.
So how long did the recuperation take?
When I got back immediately that night, they took me into an Army aid station. An Army doctor took the shrapnel out right there. And it took a while totally to heal up because of jungle rot and dirtiness, and Joe can tell you about this too. You know, I mean, when you get over there, you're dirty till months after you come back, you're still getting it out of your skin. But we had a lot of problems with infection due to that. But they kept me up on penicillin, and immediately after that, we were being replaced up north at that time. And then we were taken to Dong Ha, and moved out of there and went south of Da Nang, about 20 miles, probably close to a town called An Hoa, Liberty Bridge. A lot of people remember those areas there.
Liberty Bridge and Dong Ha are featured in Apocalypse Now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you've seen the movie, there's
Yeah.
Been over.
Yeah. But that was first.
That was a movie too.
Yeah,
When
that
I
was
was-
a movie.
When I got to Vietnam, that 1st Marine Division was south of Da Nang and Da Nang area, but we were temporary duty to the 3rd Marine Division, which was in Quezon at the time in Hue City. I was in Hue, I was in Camp Carroll, Rockpile places. These are all support bases all around that area. And then going through Hue City was amazing how a city could be blown up so much and people still survive there and live. You know, it was a mess when we went through there. And then we went back down south of Da Nang. We never dealt anymore with NVA regulars, and then it was all Viet Cong down there with sappers and guerrilla warfare.
You mentioned that at some point, someone looked at your file, saw the problem with the iron. You got moved out of a frontline combat?
Yeah, this was like in March, April of '69.
So quite a
I've
ways
been
into
through
the
another
tour.
Operation Mead River, and we lost a couple more guys in that operation. And my head corpsman in charge of all the medics happened to see my file and was going through it. And another one of the corpsmen, is a friend of mine today, had told him about my file and said, "Hey, this guy was really been."
Yeah.
He wasn't supposed to be in combat, but he was, and he said he never complained once. Now you guys are going to ship him back. I really didn't want to go back to Da Nang at that time because I'd become close to these guys. You know,
Sure.
it's like a family. They told us when we first got to Vietnam not to get close to each other because you don't know if your buddy's going to be there. That's hard to do. When you go through that kind of day in, day out, death, destruction, combat, where you rely on each other to live, your family. You know each other. You know everything about the other guy. And
Well, there's no place to get away from them. You eat, sleep, right, with them all the time.
Did you go in R&R?
I went to Tokyo for 7 days. Really enjoyed it.
Now, you weren't married at the time.
No.
So,
If I'd have been married, I wouldn't have been married by now. No.
and you wouldn't have gone to Tokyo.
Yeah, that's right. I would have went to Hawaii.
Were you married, Gary?
no, it wasn't.
So, did you go to R&R?
Well, I was set to go on R&R, and I got bumped by a Navy officer, and so I did an in-country R&R at China Beach. So I'm still looking for that officer.
What's the funniest thing that happened to you in Vietnam? Can you think of something that was really funny or humorous, that just kind of crazy?
Wow, that's a good one.
I don't know that it's really funny if you're an animal activist, but here we are going through a village and there's a dog tied up there, and everybody's petting it, and the dog's licking, and so we set up our perimeter for the night, to protect the village that night while we're going through. And then we looked back and they butchered this dog, and cooking it. And I said,
These are the Vietnamese who did it.
yeah, I mean it is, but that's a way of life. That's survival over there too, and it just really got me because I've had dogs all my life, and that just, I guess it's not funny, but it's a weird,
Unusual part.
But it was not for them.
Oh, it was?
Dogs, monkeys,
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, when you're hungry, you eat.
Yeah.
I seen a pink elephant with her.
A pink elephant.
Yeah.
Tell us that.
Well, it really wasn't a pink elephant. We dropped smoke one night because we were picking up automatic weapon fire, and this elephant happened to be walking right through it and looked pink from the air.
So there were elephants in
Oh,
Vietnam?
yeah. Up in north, when you get up north, you could shoot anything that moved.
Tigers.
So,
Tigers?
oh yeah, monkeys, tigers, you name it, they have it. So we shot that elephant that night because they use it to carry goods with. We could not shoot it with an M60, it just bounced off. But a rocket took it out.
Yeah.
Wild horses, there's a bunch of wild horses up in there.
Any other incident you want to talk about from your
Probably
experience in country?
The worst point that I had in Vietnam was after you made your gun runs, you was completely out of ammo. You would have to go back. You may fly a half hour, 35 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it was, go back and refuel, get all the ammo loaded back on, and then go right back where you came from. Where these guys didn't have a break like it. But when you're sitting there like this, just sitting there for an hour, hour and a half, just knowing you're going back in there, that is probably the worst part.
How many gun runs during the day might you make?
Oh, we might fly 16, 18 hours a lot of days.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We fly after dark.
Same pilot, same co-pilot,
Oh, yeah.
fly
Oh, yeah.
that much?
Oh, yes.
I mean, weren't you kind of worried that these guys are getting tired and fatigued? And,
When your adrenaline kicks in, you don't get tired. They was in the same boat we was. We was tired. Yeah. I mean, we may come back in, sit for an hour, and in the middle of the night get scrambled out because somebody's getting overrun. They hit the ammo dump one night in Quang Nhân, and we flew all night that night. And then the next day we had a big mission and we flew all day. I mean, just, but everybody's in the same boat, you know. And would you say, no, I need some sleep, but yet he's out there in the boonies getting over to come? No, you're gonna go out there.
Yeah.
And he would do the same if we
Sure.
were getting over, and they would come after us.
Right.
You know, you get this loyalty to the people. And
Unit I was with was a reactionary unit, pretty much, and we would respond to the hot spots, you know. One of the things that, you know, you talk about, well, you're back in the rear. There was no rear in Vietnam. When I was in Da Nang, I thought, well, you know, okay, this is all right, you
I was
know.
in
But you get
country.
mortar rounds and rockets and stuff at night constantly. And the medical battalion, they didn't hesitate to fire at the medical battalion because it was demoralizing
Sure.
to the troops, you know. They set off an ammo dump at Da Nang Air Base in '69 while I was there, and we had rockets and stuff blowing into our compound. Well, they moved everybody to Red Beach, which was the 1st Marine Division Rear in Da Nang, but me and 2 other corpsmen stayed with the ones that night because we had critical injury that couldn't be moved. But then we knew there was live rounds in the thing, and we stayed that night and stayed with them until they got them cleared out, and then 2 days later, I think they brought the rest of them back.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other experience you want to talk about, Gary?
Yeah,
in your country?
the one thing I want to get across about Vietnam, other than politics,
Right.
we can go into that forever, but I know with some of the Vietnam movies that come out, first Platoon, some of the others, they portrayed all Vietnam veterans as crazed, pot smoking, drug enhancement. You know, I'm not saying it wasn't over there, and I'm not saying it didn't in some areas, and I'm sure it was. You know, I don't doubt it. But the Marines units I were with, they were really strong on that. You were a reactionary force. You had to react. You had to do what you're supposed to do. They were strong. They had K9s all the time. They were checking bunkers and constantly. But it was never a problem while I was in the field or while I was at the medical battalion. And that's saying one thing that's stuck with me forever is the portrayal of, hey, let's get high. You know, who cares whether they come in tonight or not? That didn't happen. No.
How about your base, Joe?
We didn't have it either. Just didn't have it. First off, if you had a door gunner that was on pot, you were not going to be with him very long because he's endangering your life. And that's the first thing they'd ship you out of. So, just didn't happen.
When you left country, where did you fly out of from Vietnam?
I flew out of Da Nang, and within 24 hours, I was home as a civilian.
So you flew from Da Nang, stop over where?
We stopped in Hawaii and refueled.
And then where?
Went to Fort Euless, Washington, got mustered out that day, and that night I was sitting, or the next day I was sitting at home.
So what was the date?
Gosh, I don't know. It was Easter Sunday.
Okay. Coming back on the plane, what were the feelings?
Oh, you just can't imagine how relieved he was.
This was a commercial flight, right?
Yes, it was. It was all Vietnam, veterans coming back from Vietnam. When we got into Fort Lewis, Washington, they gave us a big speech about re-enlistment and everything. That was kind of silly. Something that most people don't realize in Vietnam, if you come back to the States with 90 days or less, you got out. I extended 11 days over there, so I come back with 89 days, so I got out.
Did you get your free steak dinner at Fort Lewis?
Yes, and I probably drank about 2 gallons of milk too, because we never had milk for a year.
That was a big.
No, I mean, you're coming back in 69.
Mm-hmm. Well, 68.
68, okay. Obviously by 68, a lot of political uproar in the United States.
They threw eggs at us when we landed.
Okay.
They did.
So were you anticipating this on the flight
No.
home? No.
Tell you an incident that really got to me was we was in the airport after we got all out. There was this sergeant just back from Vietnam. He was probably 19, 20 years old. He couldn't get a beer. He spent a year of his life in Vietnam. They would not let him have a beer at the airport. And then, you know, that really stuck with me. And then when I got back to home, back to Waytown, and I went to the tavern one night and there were some people down there and they made some remarks that I really, and I've known these people almost all my life. And you know, I could careless about them.
You weren't in uniform,
No, no.
obviously. What
They
kind
knew I
of
had been in Vietnam.
what kind of remarks were
That
they?
we was over there just having a party. We didn't
Oh.
go over to fight the war.
Right.
When they was in World War II, they went over to fight.
So you guys were losers.
Yeah, and you know, if you think about it, you can't fight a war if the government won't let you fight the war.
Right. Right.
I mean, we was getting people killed, we was doing what we was told to do, but you can't conquer somebody, there's nobody there to conquer,
Right.
because all their government was in North Vietnam. Who do you conquer?
What was your experience coming back here?
Coming back, we flew Continental Airline.
Out of
Out of Da Nang. The pilot, we talked to him, we stopped in Okinawa overnight, you know, on the way back, and refueled, and then we flew on in. Talked to him, and he said that every time they touched down in the war zone, they got a $1,000 bonus. So you had to, that's where you have aircraft like that going in. I don't know how much the company got, you know, but I know the pilot. But anyway, we were happy, and we were staged out into what's called corrals in Da Nang, and they keep you there, and you're all scruddy and dirty, you know, and ready to get out of there, and they always get the new guys coming in off the aircraft, and they're refueling real quick, and you're right on, you know. But they got the new guys walking out, and of course the guys were doing all the catcalls that happened to us when we went in. And they said, hey, you know, new guys, you know.
Well, there's another word.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah,
Fresh meat, you know, the old thing that you heard, you know, but I just kind of stood back and just watched it, you know. They got us on that aircraft, and of course we're worried because they always got mortar rounds, always rockets, there's always, well, when you take off, are they going to fire 50 cals at you? What's going to happen? It happened several times. And we were scared, like the day coming in. You couldn't believe this day finally got here. You couldn't believe you survived it. You wondered why you survived it when so many didn't, you know. And here we were, we took off, and it was just dead silence on that airplane as we lifted off. Dead silence, and then the pilot announced that they were leaving Vietnam airspace, and then cheers. I mean, it was just so loud and boisterous for about 20 minutes. Then it settled back down to that dead silence again. And guys just sat there and either went to sleep or just sat there and just, I saw a lot of stares, a lot of just reliving, rethinking, wondering what we're going to. We heard stories of what was going on in the States, you know. So we went to Okinawa, and we were supposed to land in Hawaii, and the pilot radioed back that he thought he had enough fuel left. He was going to try to make it to the States. We wouldn't think, you know. So, anyway, so we flew into El Toro Marine Corps Air Base in LA, you know, and as we left the base, like Joe said, the protesters, eggs, tomatoes, and all that stuff, we were prepared for that. The only thing we weren't prepared for was maybe we should have been in civilian clothes then when we left there. We got to LA International, and a lot of protesters there.
Were you getting out of the Navy?
No, I had plenty. I had right at a year, a little over a year left, so they'd only give you up to 120 days early out, which I got that at the end of my tour. Right. But I had to go on to another duty station after leave at home, and so we flew into home, and the first thing I done was shed my uniform, and you know, got into civies. But the timing was bad. I think, in retrospect, I think that coming out of a war zone, first thing they should have done to us was taken us to a military base somewhere for 30 days at least and give us some decompression time. I got home July the 2nd, 4th of July. What do they have the 4th of July? Fireworks. You know, I mean, that's, here you come out of a war zone, all you heard was bombs, and my mom and dad said, well, let's go watch fireworks. I don't want to watch fireworks. I've seen enough, I've heard enough, you know, I don't. Right. You know, the firecrackers sound like an AK-47. Right. Everything sounded like the enemy coming in, and it was. And here you were dealing with the people like, you know, a home that had indifference to you then because they know where you were. Nobody at home called it baby killer or any of that, you know. They didn't say that, but you could tell the feelings were there that they were, you know, we were wrong and sure somebody else was right.
Even today, a lot of rocket stuff like income.
Oh, yeah. I just came from Vietnam Veterans Reunion this last week, Kokomo. There was over 50,000 there. And of course, in timing with what's going on now, they fired a 21-piece artillery salute, and you have seen guys still today just that sound. Every time you hear them sounds, or a gun going off, or anything that resembles what you had over there, it comes back again. It's never going to leave. For so many years after I was back, you know, I got involved in my job and tried to bury it and tried to forget it, and found out you can't do it, because I was, as a police officer, I kept dealing with Vietnam veterans that were having problems,
Sure.
you know, or not settling into society, or just not given the chance or taking the chance. Some of it was they never took a chance to do it too. But it never left, it never went away. Then in, I think it was 1986, a friend of mine talked me into going to Chicago to the Welcome Home Parade. I was really nervous about that, but when I got there and done it, it was the best thing I ever done in my life, because it released quite a bit that was built up. Something about going down LaSalle Avenue in the ticker tape parade, knee deep in ticker tape, and people cheering at you for a change and say, hey, welcome home, Vietnam vet, you know. And at the end of it, I was with some Marines that were over there in the same area that I was. It was a pretty emotional ending there, you know. It was very, there wasn't a dry eye around. I mean, it just, a lot of guys came home that day. I believe that, you know. I think, and you hear them talking about that, but I think that really opened up a lot of things. And they've been going on reunions ever since, you know. Some people go, some people don't, you know. I mean, it's, to me, it's been a release.
Yeah.
Because not to tell war stories. Everybody's got enough war stories. I don't want to hear it, but I want to go and be with somebody that was there and knows what I'm talking about when you're talking, or knows how you're feeling when you have those bad moments, or knows that, you know.
How has the West Central Vietnam Veterans Group helped you?
Oh, quite a bit. Just like Gary's saying, it's just talking things out. I think one of the best things we ever did was we brought the moving walk to Crawfordsville. And I think we was overwhelmed how many people showed up. Overwhelmed.
Wait, what year was that, Gary? Do you remember?
That was
92?
92.
Somewhere 92 and 93. We figured if we had 3,000 people there, we would be tipped.
It took almost 5 years of planning to get that through, you know, and we was on enlisted. We actually got in that soon because somebody else had couldn't cancel them, and it was right at the time of the Covered Bridge Festival, which brought a lot of people. And we had over 25,000 sign in the law coming in, but we don't know, a lot of them didn't sign the law. And a lot of veterans came at night by themselves. I mean, we had lots of people there at night, you know. But a lot of people could never get to Washington, D.C. to see the real wall.
You've been there to Washington, D.C., and you've been there.
We went together.
You did?
No, we didn't. Remember?
Oh, that's right.
I went out.
There was a bunch of Vietnam veterans. I took my dad's motorhome, and there was 11 of us went out one time for the weekend.
What was your impression? I mean, what were you feeling when you said?
Well, I've been out there. I've been there 3 or 4 different times now. I went out, first time I went out with the Boy Scouts. I took my boy and a bunch of Boy Scouts out there. And as the parent, you know, you got 2 or 3 kids you're supposed to take care of. I was the only Vietnam veteran that went. And the people with me, they said, we'll take your kids. And I just went by myself, went down and went. It's very, very emotional.
Yeah.
Very, very emotional.
How about your first time?
It was, I was out, my daughter was going to a school for the federal government in Washington, D.C., and my wife and her had decided they wanted to go to the White House. That was Capitol building that day. And I said, well, I want to go see the wall. You know,
Sure.
And they dropped me off there, and I kind of wished I would have went with these guys or somebody.
Right.
I couldn't at the time, you know.
Right.
But as I topped the slope there looking down at it, it just all came home again. And then I looked through the list, and I went to the day that I was wounded, and I saw Lieutenant Daniel Anderson and the other guy's names there on the wall, and it just really hit home, and it was really hard to deal with for a long time after that.
Sure.
I don't think it could make anything that done more Vietnam veterans.
Yeah.
You sit there and wonder, why were you allowed to survive? And the only thing I think is we were allowed to survive so that we can go out and help others that are having trouble with survival.
Right. What's the one image that sticks with you of your Vietnam experience in country? Is there an image or a sound? You mentioned the smell earlier on, but other than the smell,
Well, my wife would probably tell you that I don't get as close to her as I used to. I knew her in high school, but I feel that I'm more one on myself, within myself. I don't get as close as I should sometimes. Sure. And it's just that you get that feeling, you can't. I don't know why. Maybe if I went to therapy or something, it would help me, but it's just that scared of getting real, real close to somebody.
Because of that sense that you were going to lose someone over in Vietnam, and it carries over into the civilian world.
And you talk about the smell. Every once in a while, you'll just pick up a smell, and you're back in bed.
How about helicopter sounds?
Every time one goes over, as soon as I hear one, I have to look and see.
Yeah.
You can tell if you even.
I suspect that's true of anyone who's been in Vietnam. That's one of the sounds that just sticks.
That brings it back again. The certain noise you associate with it.
Yeah. But if you hear a helicopter, it just kind of flashes you back.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you? What do you bring back? An image, a sound?
Regardless of what happened with Vietnam, regardless of whatever happened after Vietnam and what we were done, I still brought with me the pride that I served my country when the country taught. My dad always taught me that it's an honor to serve your country, and I believe it today. And you're seeing it today. I still have that pride and being a proud American, and we've got the greatest country with all its fallacies. We've got the greatest country in the world, and I would like to offer to anybody that disagrees with that to go where we've been and see what we've seen, to try to discredit, what we said. Mm-hmm. And I still think what we did was honorable. What we did was right. What we were trying to do was right, and we just weren't allowed to finish it, do it right.
Agree with that? That basically the problem was we weren't allowed to really carry out military.
We did not. Everybody, one of the veterans said that at one time that we won our war. Well, I said, we weren't allowed to win our war. Mm-hmm. We could have won our war. And I think, looking back at World War I, World War II, World War III, there's unfinished business done at the end of those periods. Korea War, Vietnam, no doubt, Gulf War. We're still having problems because of not finishing. And my thing now, if we're going into war now, is a commitment to fight the war and fight the war until it's done.
I'll give you an instance of how our hands was tied over there. We was flying along one day and we picked up automatic weapon fire. So we called it in that we was getting fired upon. We was told not to go in because there's friendly troops in the area. The pilot made a circle around, we come back by, we got automatic weapon fire again. He turned and we went in. When we landed, they was there. Going to write us up for court-martial for whatever. Except the guy said, well, the radio's not working. The warrant officer says, our radio's not working. They sent a radio tech down. He said, well, it's got a short in it. We heard everything they said. Yeah. But, just things like that.
Yeah. Another thing that we did, after immediately coming to the end of the Gulf War, veterans were starting to return from the Gulf War. And it was mentioned at the time, about should we honor these veterans, and one veteran had said, well, I'm not sure, we weren't honored when we come home. And I said, if we don't, then we're no better than what we said, when we come back. I said we should do that. So we got involved and we helped co-chair the welcome home at Milligan Park for the Gulf veterans. And we didn't ever want them to feel like we did, coming home.
Sure. I'm going to end with this one question, and that is, given the circumstances of last week at the World Trade Center, Pentagon, Pennsylvania, what one piece of advice would you give the President of the United States as he's sort of contemplating what action to carry out against the terrorists? What would you say?
Do not enter into it unless you have the commitment to finish it and stop this terrorism today, period.
No half-hearted.
I think we have to. No, I think we have to. And I think he's got the right attitude going into it. But I would say, be committed. I think there's going to be casualties. Be prepared for that. I don't know whether our country's prepared for that. There's good possibility.
Sure.
But be committed to stop it at all costs.
I agree. Go in there and complete what you go in to do. Desert Storm, we backed up before we was done. We should have, if we'd have went on, maybe we wouldn't have had this. You know, I know hindsight's 20/20,
Right.
still, you know, it always left it in your mind. And you got to remember, Russia was in Afghanistan. That was their Vietnam. They could not conquer that country. So we better take a long, hard look before we go in there and be prepared.
One other thing with Desert Storm that I saw that really bothered me, and it was happening in Vietnam too, is the media on the war right beside you. How can you fight a war with a camera in your face, you know, and reaction? I would caution him about allowing the media to be there, because sure, we use the media in Desert Storm, you know, to fool the enemy.
Right.
But something about parents sitting home watching bodies coming home, that really, it's going to test their commitment to doing this. And I hope to God it doesn't happen, but I know the possibilities there.
One of the things that we need to do now is get behind our veterans, our American Legion, our VFW. Gary is a past commander of the American Legion. I'm past commander of the American Legion here in Crawfordville. And we need to back them, show them that we support them. Right now, you see government taking all of our benefits away from us. Maybe this will help us. I don't know. I hate to get a benefit back by somebody's life, but you know, we need to just back our president.
Any final comment? Anything that you want to say at this point about anything that we've discussed? This is sort of your last chance.
I guess what upsets me more than anything nowadays is somebody that didn't go to Vietnam tried to come off as a Vietnam veteran.
Okay.
That really ticks me off. I earned the right to become a Vietnam veteran. Don't take that away from me.
Are you familiar with the professor at Mount Holyoke? His name is Ellis, historian. He claimed to be a Vietnam veteran, taught a course in Vietnam at Mount Holyoke College, and would tell war stories in his class. And someone finally started doing some checking, and it turns out he was in the Army, however, got a deferment after he graduated from college so he could finish his PhD in history.
We've seen a lot of this.
And then he ended up teaching at West Point. He'd never been in Vietnam. He claimed to have been in a lot of combat, that he was on Westmoreland's staff, and it just went on.
We've seen a lot of it at our reunions. They show up, and when you get to talking to them,
It doesn't take long
you
to
can
figure
understand, you know. He says, well, I was in Nang, south of Saigon. Well, we were, you know. I mean, that's it. They've changed the map.
So why do you think it is? Why is it that people now want to be claimed as Vietnam veterans?
Well, I think since 1986 it became popular. Yeah, with all the welcome homes that they were having, the parades in New York City and Los Angeles, it became popular to be a Vietnam veteran, so everybody wanted to be a part of that good feeling, you know. And I think that was a responsible.
Until then, most people wouldn't even tell
Right,
you they were
exactly.
Vietnam.
Exactly.
Wouldn't acknowledge. There's still a lot of Vietnam veterans that are living in the mountains that are on their own.
You asked me about
that are by themselves. You know.
about the West Central Indiana Vietnam Veterans Association. That probably brought more people out because we get together and we don't tell war stories. We just help each other.
Mhm.
You know, there's something about somebody that was in combat, that's been shot at, same as you have, that you can talk to, that you can't talk to other people.
Sure. Yeah.
That started with Jim Tagg, myself, and Larry Hauser. Were working out at when they was building the hospital, the new hospital. We were talking about. I had some videos that I took while I was in Da Nang and all around that area, and they was wanting to see it. And I said, well, you know, maybe we ought to get together out to Legion, get a few guys together.
Sure.
One thing led to the other, and so I went out.